Oh, hi. I'm Zach Hertz. Welcome to Rise of Rome. Now, I couldn't make it today because I'm busy working in San Diego, but I just wanted to explain to you a little bit about how this class is going to be structured, the kinds of issues that we'll be dealing with, and what my expectations are for you going forward. And similarly, what you're allowed to expect of me. Just want to make sure this class works as well as possible for everybody. So, in Rise of Rome, we begin with the rise of the Macedonian Empire under Philip and Alexander, and end with the beginning of the Roman Empire, i.e., the Battle of Actium, the fall of the Republic, and the ascension of Augustus. So, what does that mean? In the other two classes, in Georgetown's Ancient History sequence, History of Ancient Greece, and of course, Imperial Roman History, which some of you might have taken with me last semester, there's a clear temporal focus on the evolution of one culture, right? That's not the case here. The Rise of Rome studies broader shifts throughout the Mediterranean political context from the multipolar, diffuse, sort of chaotic power structure of the Hellenistic period in the Eastern Mediterranean to unified Roman control and to the eventual unification of Rome's own political system. That means this class doesn't have that same clear structural through line as do the others. We're going to be doing the first half roughly Hellenistic Greece, second half roughly Republican Rome, with a much heavier thematic focus in each. We're going to be examining not just how political structures change throughout the Eastern Mediterranean, but also cultural production throughout this period, also legal change throughout this period, the status of women, the status of slaves, the status of all kinds of different people, how economies work in a world where you have different kingdoms trading with each other throughout the Mediterranean basin, right? So that's going to be a big, big difference. Another big difference for those of you who took Greek history or took Roman Imperial is that I'm bringing to this material my own specific questions, right? So my big idiosyncratic obsessions are really how do people come to understand themselves as members of a political community? How do people understand themselves in relation to a king, a pharaoh, a senate? Why do they listen to that king, that pharaoh, that senate? How are these questions dealt with differently in, say, Ptolemaic Egypt versus Carthage or versus Roman Italy in maybe 200 BCE? And how do these different political systems affect the way culture is produced in each of these societies? What are the different sorts of pressures on an Alexandrian court poet versus, say, the Latin epic figure Ennius? These are simply problems that I care about more than other professors who care about their own issues very differently than I do. This is going to inflect my class, obviously. But one point that I want to make very explicit is that you don't have to care only about the same things I do. So, for example, these are the questions that jump out at me when I'm writing about the Hellenistic period or about the Roman Republic. There are all kinds of people working on this period who play different games. So, for example, there's a thriving scholarly debate about whether the rapid expansion of Rome throughout the Western Mediterranean in the Republican period reflects something idiosyncratic about Roman culture or simply Rome responding to other actors in a broad, multinational, sort of game theoretic state. So that's really how you might approach this through a military or political history lens. Social historians of the Republic, I'm thinking in particular of someone like Lisa Mignone, are interested in how settlement patterns in the city of Rome change over the course of the Republican period. How, say, the Aventine Hill develops its image as a plebeian district. That's, again, not my primary interest, but I'm going to try to give you the tools to explore questions like that yourself. Or, let's go to the Eastern Mediterranean. You have figures like John Ma, who are looking at how city-states, what we call the polis, in this period understand themselves in relation to the imperial powers that start to rise up throughout the Hellenistic? How does the polis interact with the Seleucid monarch in the far eastern Mediterranean? How do they interact with the other sort of multi-city formations that you see on the Greek mainland in this period? How does that affect the way people conceive of power? Again, you might care about that. You might care about my jam. You might care about anything. That's fine. History is really not so much about asking a discrete set of questions, but about using a discrete set of tools to understand what we can do to answer those questions. And that's really how I understand this class working. Yes, you're going to be learning relevant names, relevant dates, some of the basics of how to interact with historical material. But the most important thing I can teach you, sorry, it's a little windy in San Diego, is really how to examine primary evidence. We'll be looking at primary sources, textual, archaeological, artistic, and just thinking through what they mean. How, as a historian, you can use them to approach different sets of questions, right? And I really want that to be the major takeaway of this class. Now, I want to talk a little bit about class structure today. Obviously, if you have any questions about this, you can email me. But just to give you the basics, you're going to write a few short essays, very short, we're talking one-page, single-spaced, as well as a midterm and a final. This is just so that I can make sure that you know how to work with this material and you have the basic factual command to be able to take this into other classes that you might want to study, all right? And in addition to those, another way that I'm going to make sure that you have a command of the material is, just a warning about this, I cold call. I assume some of you know what that means, but I also assume some of you don't. Cold calling just means I might call on you in class without you raising your hand and ask you to talk. This is a very important part of how I teach, and I want to explain a bit about why I do it and what my promises to you are about it. I'm a firm believer that the best way to get people to talk in class is to say their name and then look at them silently. It's amazing what happens, right? That means that people are going to say some stuff that is not as polished as you might expect. When you're in a classroom where you cold call, people sometimes work ideas out on the fly. That's fine. That's actually really good. It's an important part of how historians and academics work. We work ideas out in conversation with each other. I don't care, frankly. I don't care if you don't know the right answer at the outset. This is more about you learning how to think out loud and how to think really like a professional. One of the uptakes of this is that I'm gonna be nice. If you sputter a little bit, if you lose track of your thought, I'm fine with that. And importantly, I need all of you to be fine with that. Cold calling means that some of you will look a little vulnerable sometimes. You're not always going to look perfect or prepared or polished. And if you can't deal with that, if you want to make fun of other students who sort of muck things up a little bit, I will destroy you. It is really important that we be nice to each other in this sort of classroom setting, right? Now, just one more little kind of basic point about this class. All of your sources are in English. That's translations. I assume you're all aware of this. English was not spoken in the Mediterranean world in classical antiquity, right? We're going to be reading some sources in classical Greek or dialects of classical Greek. We're going to be reading some sources in Latin. Everything is English, and that's fine. I do not expect you to analyze these texts in the original language. That said, if you know the original language and you want to talk with me about that stuff in office hours or cite Latin or Greek in your papers, mazel tov. I think that's great. Obviously, if you want to go into this field professionally, you need to learn the languages. But that is absolutely not required for this class, and that's my promise to you. Okay? So that's basic class rules. Don't worry, we're almost done. The last thing I want to talk with you about today is a little bit about your reading. As your syllabus tells you, you'll be reading a lot of Fox's Classical World. And I just want to give you a sense of what kind of questions you should be keeping an eye on as you do that. reading, okay? Try to think about how Macedonian politics, as he describes them, work. Why are people listening to the kings of Macedon? Now, political scientists or political historians sometimes refer to this as a question of legitimacy. What makes a Macedonian monarch legitimate? This is something I deal with a ton in my own writing, and it's something that I want us to think through. It's a set of questions I think are fascinating. So, keep that in mind as you do your reading. You might get asked what you think the answer is in class, and you should be prepared for that, okay? Because you're going to see some very different answers to that in the different states that we examine, and it's a good, just sort of tool to think with as you approach this material. Now, the last sort of logistical stuff that I want to discuss, and again, this is on the syllabus, but I want to emphasize it. I am very responsive to email, even right now when I'm in Southern California. Feel free to shoot me an email at Z as in zebra, H149 at georgetown.edu, or come to my office hours in 318 Healy, okay? You can always get in touch with me. I try very hard to be responsive. I reserve the right to wait at least 24 hours, but people who have taken my classes can tell you it's almost never 24 hours, okay? If you have any questions, please let me know. If you need any sort of disability accommodation, please talk to the Academic Resource Center as soon as you can. I am happy to work with you. You actually have strong privacy rights that make it difficult for me to ask you questions about your disability directly. So your best bet is to go to Resource Center, let them figure out what accommodation you need. They will tell me what you need. They will not tell me why you need it. I won't ask. I will do what they tell me. And that's really, I think, the best outcome for everybody. One other thing I want to bring up. Look, this is an intro class. I assume a lot of you are freshmen. Adjusting to college is really hard. If you want to talk partly about this material, but also just about other kinds of adjustment issues, I'm here. I am happy to discuss. I take that part of my job incredibly seriously. I want to see you succeed as a person and as a historian, all right? There is one warning I need to give you. I'm what's called a mandatory reporter. That means if you tell me anything that might implicate somebody in a crime or serious abuse, again, I'm happy to talk, but I cannot keep secrets. I'm actually required by federal law to notify other people or kick things upstairs. So if you want to tell me about anything really serious, please understand that while I'm happy to walk you through the process, I cannot keep you safe from that process. I am legally obligated to report anything like that you tell me. But still, feel free to tell me. Just don't ask me to keep secrets. And generally, seriously, talk to me. I've been in college. It's rough. I needed some fairly serious support systems to help me get through college unscathed. And I really want to make sure that I can pay that forward and be that sort of support system for you. Now, speaking of support systems, see you Tuesday.